For being here. Thank you for what you do each and every day. Anyone who pays attention to the evils of the Chinese Communist Party knows the name Jimmy Lai. Jimmy is a great advocate for free press and a hardworking entrepreneur who is being held as a political prisoner in Hong Kong because he didn't cower to Xi Jinping or censor the atrocities he committed. What the Chinese Communist Party is doing to him is disgusting. Let's be clear, Xi Jinping and his thugs are responsible for this abusive treatment of Mr. Lai, not the government of Hong Kong, which is nothing more than a puppet of Beijing. Jimmy's a friend. It's an honor to speak on his behalf and do whatever I can to help return him to freedom. To each of you, what can be done to help Jimmy Lai and other political prisoners? However you want to start.
I think that Jimmy Lai is, such an important figure because he represents, as you said, freedom in general. I think there are several things that Congress can do and several things that the administration can do. First, it was encouraging to see that Jimmy has been adopted by a member of Congress. That's an important move. But I think that beyond this, it would be great to see State Department expanding its ability to prioritize political prisoner release at the executive branch level. I advocated in my Hudson Institute report, which I published last December, for the creation of an Office of Political Prisoner Advocacy that would augment the work of the Special Envoy for Hostage Affairs and make it so that it is squarely within the U.S.'s realm to be able to not only advocate for U.S. Hostages abroad, but also for individuals like Jimmy Lai, who are not American citizens, but who are equally worthy of our best efforts.
Thank you. Ms. Hu, how you guys want to go?
First of all, Senator Scott, may I thank you for your very powerful advocacy for Jimmy Lai. He's extremely lucky to have you in his corner. We're very grateful for everything that you've done in relation to his case. I agree entirely with the remarks that you've made about Jimmy Lai and the importance of his case. And there is such urgency to his case now, given his state of health. And just to put that very starkly in context, there's a very strong evidence base showing that there is a much elevated risk of death in circumstances where you have elderly prisoners who are held on solitary confinement. That is elevated further when you have an elderly prisoner who's diabetic.
Right, with no sunlight.
With no sunlight, that's right. With no sunlight, limited fresh air, very limited, meaningful human interaction. So in any circumstances, regardless of the conditions, there's an elevated risk of death when you have someone held in solitary confinement for that length of time. International law is clear that once you hit 15 days, that's problematic. He's been held in solitary confinement for over 1,600 days. That's what we're dealing with since December 2020. So there's an elevated risk of death in any event. And because of his age and his state of health, that is a very real risk. Now, it seems to us that it is simply not in China's interests for Jimmy Lai to die in prison. You heard the name Liu Xiaobo earlier. It seems to us that if, as the Chinese Communist Party repeatedly say, they consider Jimmy Lai to be a notorious anti-China element and to be a risk to national security and so on, turning him into a martyr doesn't seem to be in their own interests either. We think there's a critical moment coming up now because as more focus is turning to US and UK relationships with China, it seems to us it's essential that Jimmy Lai's case is resolved before any talk of normalization or closer relations with China progresses. Our view is that Mr. Lai must be released before China is taken seriously as a credible negotiating partner, and we need to start seeing conditionality and consequences to engagement with China while Mr. Lai remains behind bars.
Thank you.
Senator Scott, thank you for your attention to this very, very important measure. I know that you were in Hong Kong in 2019, so I think your experience with Hong Kong also reflects the PRC's takeover. In regards to Jimmy Lai, I think in my opening remarks, I mentioned two recommendations. One is to prioritize human rights as a core U.S. foreign policy principle, and secondly, for the U.S. to urge for the release of Hong Kong's prisoners of conscience, including Jimmy Lai, Chow Hang-tung, Leung Kwok-hong, and Owen Chow. And I think it is a very, very crucial moment that we mention these names in every conversations that we are having with the PRC, including in regards to AI and trade. I think it is so crucial that we continue putting that pressure from the Congress and from the executive branch in regards to call for the release of Jimmy Lai and then the others.
I agree completely with all of these suggestions. I would just add that you and or members of the subcommittee, other members of the Senate, people in the administration, should relentlessly ask to see him, even if you know you're going to be denied, and insist on his release. It could be transactional, it could be situational, but the reality is that one of the ways that the US and the German governments eventually secured the release of Liu Xiaobo's widow, who was arbitrarily detained for 8 or 9 years after his death, confined to solitary in her apartment in Beijing, was that they just kept asking. Angela Merkel just kept asking. Every single time she saw Xi Jinping, she just said, "You have to let her go. You have to let her go." And it was just, it was that consistency, and that the requests were made at that level. And I think that's something that easily people who are as committed to this issue as you are could do. Thanks.
Thanks for what each of you do. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Scott, I'd like to yield 5 minutes to the senator from Oregon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And